Okay, there we go. All right. Present. All right, so you guys should have I sent out the guided notes a little late today, but you guys should have them there on Google Classroom. This was the last slide from Tuesday, so you don't need to write this down. You should already have it. So we were talking on Tuesday, introducing a section on trying to find the scientific search for human origins, right? And the study of human evolution. The idea that like all of the species that we've kind of evolved over time and to our kind of modern form, if you will. And so we had talked about how, in a sense, the kind of factors that those who were engaging in paleoanthropology looked at, like, size of skull and bone structure. But the big thing was the idea of bipedalism, the ability to walk upright on two legs. All right. And so I was talking about how we have different categories on the kind of evolutionary tree, if you will. And so according to your textbook, we talked about yesterday, the oldest one being Australopithecines, with the discovery of the tongue child by Raymond Dart in 1924. However, that wasn't really fully kind of accepted until probably 1974 with the discovery of Lucy, where you guys did that worksheet on there. All right. And then those footprints that were discovered in Tanzania by Mary Leakey. So the theory is that our kind of species, if you subscribe to the theory of evolution, originated in Africa. And all major Australopithecine discoveries have been found only in East and Southern Africa. All right. But then, like I said, your textbook is already outdated with the discovery and the classification in 2010 of Ardipithecus. All right. And so the next time they do this textbook, next volume, they're going to have to include that in the story as the oldest, most complete hominid, which is, again, the term for a creature that walks upright. So Australopithecine, the theory kind of evolved into Homo habilis, which the name means skillful man. The thing that kind of separates Homo habilis from Australopithecine and Ardipithecus is the use of stone tools, right? And so the first major, and again, those tools were essentially just rocks that were flaked and flinted, flint stones, if you will, right? And the purpose was just basically to crack open bones from game that had been basically left there by predators. So our human ancestors would gain more sustenance, right? The idea of surviving, right? And at that time, we were not at the top of the food chain, if you will. All right. And so this is a picture of Mary and Louis Leakey, who were credited with discovering the first major Homo habilis discovery. Like I said, this is something like you'll see your grandparents holding the jawbone of a 2 million year old hominid. Most of you guys have similar pictures of grandma and grandpa, Nana and Papa doing that. The Leakeys, like the kind of the worksheet that I gave you guys yesterday, are a family of paleoanthropologists. Their son, Richard, was the one who wrote that primary source yesterday about fossil hunting. All right. Now, Homo habilis, the theory is, evolves into what we classify as Homo erectus, all right, which the term itself there means upright man. All right. The theory is about 1.6 million years old when the first time it appeared. The brain, believed based on the cap skull size and cranium shape, about 3/4 the size of us, modern humans. The thing that's significant about Homo erectus that kind of separates them from Homo habilis is they are the first to leave Africa. Right. There are discoveries outside of Africa of this classification of human species, and it's believed the first to use fire. All right. There's evidence of kind of embers that have been left behind by Homo erectus. That's the theory as of right now. All right. That Homo erectus is the one to first leave Africa and use fire. All right. And so for a while there, like the first kind of the discovery of Homo erectus actually predates Homo habilis as far as discoveries go. All right. The Homo erectus kind of looks still a little kind of ape-like, if you will. All right. The first major Homo erectus discovery was actually in the 19th century, all right, with the discovery of a fossil remains referred to as Java man. All right. Java man was credited to this Dutch anthropologist, actually an amateur anthropologist, a guy named Eugene Du Bois. Du Bois was actually a doctor by trade, but he was fascinated by Darwin. And so while everybody was kind of looking in Europe for the missing link, Du Bois had a theory that it wasn't in Europe. And so he went to what is now Indonesia. At the time, it was called, it was a property of the Netherlands, Dutch East India. All right. And so Du Bois went with paid for his own expedition there out of his own money. He had initially, I think, like a group of like 20 men with him. By the time it was all said and done, there was only one guy left. Apparently, he was somewhat of a kind of hard guy to work for. And the guy that was left was a French guy who apparently he would just cuss Du Bois out in French. Du Bois, I don't believe, knew French. So by the time, though, that they discovered this, and it was called Java Man because it was discovered on the island of Java in Indonesia, Du Bois believed that he found the missing link. So what and there's Du Bois' nice mustache, right? What he discovered here was essentially a skull cap, some teeth, but the big thing was the femur, right? And then this was kind of the earliest kind of proponents of bipedalism. I decided this is a little bit different, right? And so Dart kind of took that idea that kind of Du Bois had, the idea of bipedalism, kind of ran with it. And so when Du Bois went back to Europe, he published his findings, and thinking that he was going to be basically kind of treated as this kind of like paleoanthropologist superstar, he was challenged by other paleoanthropologists that kind of questioned, like kind of saying this may be a little bit too primate looking and such. So at one point, he actually kind of took his ball and went home. He refused to let anybody basically analyze any of his fossil remains, and eventually he was sued. The government of the Netherlands got involved, and essentially he was kind of forced to kind of basically allow people to analyze his findings. These are what's left of that. It's in a museum in Amsterdam, and so this kind of tells the story of, like, again, the leg bone is definitely kind of different than a primate, rather large, if you will. And then he was somewhat vindicated in 1920s, early 1920s. There was a discovery that looked very similar to Java Man called Peking Man. Peking was the anglicized English kind of name for Beijing. All right. And so we see this is where the theory, as time goes on, that they believe Homo erectus, as this classification human, was the first one to leave Africa. They found other discoveries like in the Middle East, all right, in Europe and such. So this kind of basically kind of pulls the kind of like the story of kind of man and their kind of migration about 1.6, 1.5 million years ago. All right. This is a recreation of what Peking Man looked like based on the kind of the skull that they had found there. A little more kind of like human-like in that sense, but still kind of a heavy brow, still somewhat primate-ish, if you will. All right. And then we're getting closer to our kind of classification of human species. Our fourth classification here is Homo sapiens. All right. Now, this is a little confusing because we would classify ourselves as Homo sapiens, but we're not there quite yet. And like I said, when they kind of redo this book, I think they're going to change some stuff around here. All right. But the name means wise man. So we're talking about 500,000 years ago, anywhere between 500,000, 200,000 years ago. Brain size about a third larger than Homo erectus. All right. This may be, though, the theory may be one of these branches on the evolutionary tree that may have died out. All right. And you'll be like, well, we're Homo sapiens, aren't we? We're technically modern Homo sapiens, in another term that we'll kind of use here. All right. But what we see here is that a kind of classification that your textbook has of Homo sapiens are Neanderthals. All right. And Neanderthals is the term given to Homo sapiens who inhabited what is mainly Europe and parts of Southwest Asia, the Middle East, like Turkey, Iraq, Israel, places like that. All right. The name comes from the Neander Valley in Germany, where a lot of these were discovered. And so other paleoanthropologists, the more modern, kind of the last 10 years, have been classifying this Homo neanderthalis. All right. And so the classification is a little confusing. All right. So this is believed by some to be the first of Homo sapiens. All right. We're not quite where we're at right now. Now, when you think of Neanderthals, a lot of times the contemporary thought is these were cavemen, basically. Mainly because a lot of the remains were found in caves. All right. And so and not just in one area, all these areas kind of throughout, even stretching from Iraq all the way to kind of like Spain in that case. All right. So, like I said, it's a little confusing. All right. Neanderthals may be one of those branches of the evolutionary tree that may have died out to a certain extent. All right. And so these are basically the kind of major Neanderthal sites that you'll see here, like a heavy concentration here in Germany and in France. All right. There's some in Spain, some down in Iraq, down in what is Israel, if you will. Now, if you notice this map here, because I'll show you guys maps, graphs, and charts all day, make it a little fancy, church it up a little bit. That map's in French. No need to thank me. It's just part of my job. All right. And so this is what we view kind of Neanderthals to kind of look like. All right. Your quintessential cavemen. All right. Now, the reason being is that you see this there's a definite difference, particularly with the kind of the nasal cavity there and such, but it's kind of what kind of they're wearing there. All right. Neanderthals, over time, the evolutionary kind of like process here, they get thicker bones, more well-developed muscles. All right. There's evidence they may even had like kind of more what we classify as like testosterone to a certain extent. But the deal is that their bodies change over time because they're living in very cold climates. But also, you see, and it says they're the first species to adapt to cold climate. They're wearing like the Neanderthal was wearing a kind of like a fur coat there, right? So they're the first of the species to kind of observe, like that animal doesn't only look delicious, but it also looks warm. So they're using, and you guys do this like you like an evolutionary concept when you guys wake up and go outside. You're not today going to go rock the chinchilla fur coat. Not that you're not major players, because major players do what they want, haters stand in silence, do what they can, but the climate doesn't adhere to that. All right. So you adapt, you evolve when it comes to basically the weather, every day. You don't even think about it. All right. So that's the kind of same thing with Neanderthals, what they did. All right. So they're the first ones to kind of adapt to a colder climate. This is actually from a museum in Germany, Neander Valley there, that has all kind of dedicated to Neanderthals. Now, we generally believe that Neanderthals are kind of like uncouth kind of like cavemen, but there's more evidence that indicates that they're a little bit more than that. All right. They are going to kind of use the kind of different tools as a means of hunting. All right. So tools start to kind of change in their nature, and we'll talk about that when we move into like the different stone ages. All right. However, like I said, don't need to write this down. It's not on there. This is for my pending Alzheimer's. Neanderthals at one point disappear. All right. So within the evolutionary tree, they're around, they survived more than 100,000 years. But as far as like kind of evolution goes, that's a relatively short period of time. So around 30,000 years ago, they believe that they kind of vanished. Although there's some believe that they may have kind of blended in with more modern humans. That theory is still out there. There's some evidence that people have Neanderthal DNA in their genetic makeup. All right. So there may be some evidence with that. All right. But in what probably happened for the most part is that they were basically kind of taken over by us, if you will. All right. And our classification, according to our text, is what they call Homo sapiens sapiens, doubly wise humans. Now, the more also you'll see in more common ways to basically classify as modern Homo sapiens. All right. So the name itself means doubly wise humans. This is us, essentially. All right. However, in Europe, we were basically kind of competing for the same kind of like game and space as Neanderthals were. right? And so there's evidence of that in Europe as well as like kind of parts of the Middle East, right? So in Europe, the kind of the Homo sapiens sapiens who competed with Neanderthals often referred to as Cro-Magnons. Cro-Magnons is a kind of a name for a French region, Magnon, in which some of these were first discovered. Right. And there's a number of theories. But for a while there, it was believed that Cro-Magnons were just inherently smarter than Neanderthals, but that may not necessarily be the case after some recent kind of discoveries. I was just watching something on a History Channel called Neanderthal Apocalypse that if you have some time to watch, it's actually pretty interesting, that kind of tests some kind of old theories and kind of changes a little bit of the story here. All right. But Cro-Magnons essentially are us. All right. That's just us basically in Europe, are kind of earliest kind of forms of modern Homo sapiens or Homo sapiens sapiens. All right. And so like a kind of comparison between the two. On the left is a Neanderthal skull. On the right is a Cro-Magnon skull. They're roughly found roughly around the same time. And so you could see that they're different. So the idea that we evolved out of Neanderthals is something that's probably is something that's kind of disputed. There's such a drastic change in the kind of appearance here. But there is some evidence that Neanderthals and maybe Cro-Magnons may have kind of interbred, if you will, on a kind of full kind of skeleton kind of appearance here. The one on the left is the Neanderthal. The one on the right is Cro-Magnons. Obviously, you see Neanderthals tend to be, on average, a little bit shorter. They do have thicker bones because they have been basically living in colder climates for a longer period of time. Cro-Magnons probably kind of migrated out of the Middle East, which warmer temperatures, as they kind of merged into Europe. So their kind of bone structures are a little bit different. All right. And then what do we know about Cro-Magnons in the sense that gave them a little bit more of an advantage, maybe over Neanderthals? One is the theory is that they had linguistic skills. Linguistics meaning the ability to communicate, that they're able to kind of like communicate in larger groups. However, there are some new discoveries that indicate that maybe Neanderthals may have had a kind of a language as well. All right, so that thing is kind of changing over time. We do know that they tended to have a longer lifespan than Neanderthals. They tended to live on average probably like 10, maybe 10 years, a little bit longer. And so as time goes on, as the years go on and on, Cro-Magnons are outliving them and basically outbreeding. All right. And then we do know that Cro-Magnons were artistic. Right, there's a lot of cave drawings that date back to that time, and that is also a theory that some people think maybe the Neanderthals kind of expressed themselves on caves and that. But right now, this is basically kind of the thing that kind of separates kind of our modern kind of early kind of modern ancestors from Neanderthals to a certain extent. And so like in places like in France, in Spain, and Germany, you find a lot of these places, you'll find these kind of cave drawings, which will kind of show a lot of them are animals and stuff that were around in the area. All right. So like I kind of show you, like this here is Locksock Cave, probably the most famous one that was in France. During World War II, there's a couple kids, I think they're like 10 years old, that accidentally kicked a soccer ball in there, and they went in there, they found all these kind of paintings on these caves, all right, that were incredibly detailed for the time, showing like images of essentially like kind of bulls and other kind of animals that were in the area. The paintings themselves are kind of painted with kind of like kind of charcoal and kind of mud and stuff like that, clay, all right, so they're kind of like a kind of darker kind of reddish hue to them. This one's pretty detailed. This one of a bull in Spain. And if you go to Spain is like one of the kind of the symbols of the country of Spain is the bull. All right. This here at a cave in France may be indicated. This looks like a horse. And if so, then this kind of talks about the appearance of horses. It pushes that kind of story back a few thousand years. We'll talk about next week the concept of domestication of animals as a means of kind of creating an advantage for cultures and that. And so, and this one you can't really quite tell. You see the kind of outlines there of the bulls. at Loxaw Cave in France, they actually had to close it to visitors. They have a section that they recreated, but because visitors were coming in there, it was kind of basically kind of decreasing the pigment on a lot of these paintings. So this was an example one in Spain in which there was people who were coming through that the kind of colors had been kind of washed off initially. All right, so that's it on the section 2 here. All right, so. Yeah, you guys got any questions or any concerns? It's a little boring, but I'll try to get through it here. All right.
No, pretty cool.
Okay. All right. So tomorrow, I'm not gonna send out a work tomorrow. You guys got like Labor Day coming up, and I don't know if you guys are aware. They're supposed to be sending out a letter today that we're going to the hybrid model next week. So any of you guys who are going to do that, if you're going to come to class, last name's A through L, you guys come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, M through Z.
Is it on Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday's our first day.
Okay.
So my plan is to test over this chapter, not tomorrow, but next Friday. All right. And so we'll do the last set of notes in class. And those of you guys who are doing full remote, I'll record these and I'll send them out and put them on Google Classroom for you. All right. So I'll try to keep everybody kind of on the same page. All right. So that's about it today. So if you have any questions or concerns, you want to shoot me an email or whatever like that, I can respond. Just let me know. All right.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, everybody. Have a good weekend, everybody.
So